Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Municipality of Thames Centre Council. The date is Monday, June the 9th, 2025, and the time is 5 p.m. And I would like to call this meeting to order. I have no additions to the agenda, so therefore I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as circulated. Deputy Mayor Smybert and Councillor Heeman, all in favor? Great, that carries. Thank you. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest from members of council? None? All right. Announcements. I do not have an announcement, but I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Lockie from Ward 2 to make an announcement.
Thank you, Worship. So I am very, very excited that the Stevenson camp that is here in Thames Centre, just off of Gore Road near Richmond, is having their 75th anniversary on Saturday, the 14th. And everybody is welcome. We would love to have a really good turnout. So it starts at 11. And then we have a free lunch at noon for anybody. We'll have lots of games and fun and use the equipment. And then we will have speeches at 1 and wrap up by 4. So it's not a full day commitment, but bring your families or anyone who would like to come.
Perfect. Thanks, Councillor Lockie. While we're on this, anyone else with an announcement that they'd like to make tonight? No? Okay. Then we'll move on to some very nice delegations here tonight. We have presentations tonight on behalf of our charity depot. This year, charity depots were held on May 3rd in Dorchester and May 10th in Thorndale. Charity depots turn unwanted items into cash for local charities. As a charity depot, residents deliver unwanted scrap metals, used batteries, and aluminum cans to depot locations where volunteers assist in unloading the items so they can be sent to local metal recyclers to be weighed and exchanged for fair market value. Additionally, the charity metal depot has helped raise over $50,000 that is given back to its volunteer groups since its start in 2008. I'd like to thank all the volunteers who help make the charity depots happen. And we would like to recognize Arts Trucking, who also graciously made a cash donation to this year's charity depot program and also provided bins that were used in this year's charity depot events. And of course, we would like to thank all the residents who participated in these charity depot events by donating their unwanted goods. So at this time, I would like to ask Jared Craven, our Director of Public Works, to join me at the front here so we can provide some checks. So just to wrap that one up, the clerk informs me because we weren't using the mics that the public wouldn't necessarily know. So the first check was presented to the MS Bike Ride. Barry Travanicek is the lead on that, and he's been doing this for a number of years. The second one was Optimus Club of North Dorchester, and the person we presented the check to was John Andrigo. And then the third one was the Thorndale Optimist Club, and the representative here was Bob Graham. So thank you. So the next item on our agenda is item 6.2 on your agenda, PSD Citywide Asset Management Plan for 2025. And Jasmine Shad of PSD Citywide is in attendance virtually to present the 2025 asset management plan. So Jasmine, whenever you are ready, please go ahead. Good evening, Jasmine. We see you. Can you hear us?
Good evening. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Go
Wonderful.
ahead.
Just give me a moment to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. Well, good evening, Madam Councilor, or Madam Mayor, councilors, and all municipal staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As you said, my name is Jasmine Shad, and I'm an asset management advisor with PSD Citywide. And I've had the privilege of collaborating with your team on the development of the 2025 Asset Management Plan, which is the focus of my presentation today. So I'll start off with a brief regulatory context, followed by the details of the 2025 Asset Management Plan, and if there are any questions at the end, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, so as you know, the province introduced Ontario Regulation 58817 under the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act in 2015. So this regulation sets out the requirements for asset management planning across all municipalities in Ontario. It requires municipalities to develop an asset management policy and submit increasingly detailed asset management plans between 2022 and 2025. So as part of this engagement, PSD Citywide has prepared an updated asset management plan that fully meets the 2025 regulatory requirements. Okay, so for 2025, the regulation requires municipalities to prepare the AMP that includes a complete state of the infrastructure, so providing an inventory and condition assessment of all assets. It must also have a proposed levels of service section with options that the municipality has considered and the life cycle costs needed to maintain those service levels over the long term and assess the impacts of anticipated growth and financial strategy at the end. Okay, so the details. Back in 2024, the municipality distributed a community engagement survey to gather input on service levels and community priorities. So the response rate was minimal, but the feedback received is still very valuable and informative for this asset management development process. This input has helped us ensure that the proposed levels of service align with local values, and actually considering public input is a requirement under the regulation. So as part of this process, 58 residents participated in the consultation and shared their perspectives. The results that we received highlighted a very strong cost-conscious preference, with 59% of respondents indicating a desire to maintain the current tax rate. In terms of service satisfaction, respondents expressed the highest confidence in bridges and culverts and in emergency response services, both of those receiving 90% satisfaction ratings. Your parks, playgrounds, splash pads, and other outdoor recreation areas also received high satisfaction at 85%. Just a few quick slides from the community engagement survey. So only a very small number of respondents expressed dissatisfaction with outdoor recreation amenities, such as your parks, playgrounds, and splash pads. And in contrast to that, roads and sidewalks received the highest level of dissatisfaction among residents, although it wasn't high, I would say, and more people indicating that they are dissatisfied in those areas. Anything marked as unsure on these charts just indicates respondents that don't have access to or utilize those service areas. So next, on average, respondents do feel that municipal services are meeting their expectations. The only service areas identified as falling below expectations more frequently would be roads and sidewalks, along with snow and ice removal, waste management, and some recreation programming. So survey results showed that 59% of respondents prefer to maintain current tax rates, while 29% would rather pay less taxes, even if it means receiving fewer services. And only 12% of the respondents were willing to accept higher taxes in exchange for improved services. Okay, so moving on to the AMP. When we talk about asset management planning, we typically divide assets into two categories. So your core assets include your roads, bridges and culverts, and your water and wastewater systems. And your non-core assets basically cover everything else, like your fleet and equipment, parks or land improvements, and municipal buildings. So this distinction helps to ensure that we're using funds efficiently and focusing on the assets that are most critical to public service and safety. It also gives us a valuable tool for communicating priorities. So both internally with staff members in council and externally to the public and funding bodies. So the total current replacement cost of the municipality's asset portfolio is estimated at $469.8 million, distributed between the asset categories shown on the chart below. So this valuation reflects the cost to replace all of your assets based on the most recent inventory available. So this asset inventory for this assessment is based on data as of December 31st, 2023. So any new assets that were acquired or constructed or commissioned after that date, they would not be included in the current figures. So any new assets should be incorporated into your future plan updates to ensure that the AMP remains current and reflective of the municipality's full asset base. So about 78% of the municipality's infrastructure is currently in fair or better condition, with an overall average condition rating of good, which translates to about 65.4%. So it is important to note that this average is weighted by replacement cost, which means that your higher value assets have a greater influence on the overall condition score. Now, for roughly 19% of assets, we had actual assessed condition data available, primarily from your street scan assessments, OSIM bridge inspections, and the CCTV reviews of underground infrastructure. So your water mains and your wastewater and storm mains. For the rest of the assets, we've relied on asset age to estimate their condition. So having those age-based estimates are helpful, but having those real condition assessments are very valuable because it gives us a much clearer picture of how assets are actually performing and helps us to make better decisions around maintenance and replacement priorities. So at existing funding levels, which include your contributions to reserves, the municipality is able to cover approximately 64.6% of its annual capital requirements for all of the infrastructure that we analyzed. So this suggests that while a majority of the necessary capital investments are currently being funded, there still is a shortfall that could affect the municipality's ability to maintain and renew assets on a schedule over time. Okay, so based on current replacement costs, the average annual capital requirement across the asset portfolio is estimated to be $9.9 million. So that would be indicated on this chart just on the red dotted line. So actual spending might vary from year to year, but this figure of $9.9 million does serve as a good benchmark for setting capital investment targets or reserve contributions. So in the chart, just a note, the capital costs have been grouped into 5-year buckets. And you'll notice that the chart also highlights a $12.5 million backlog. So this represents assets that have exceeded their estimated useful life, but they remain in service still. So not all of those assets are necessarily in poor condition or require immediate replacement. The presence of the backlog just underscores the importance of ongoing targeted condition assessments. Okay, so just an off note, I guess, an ongoing benchmarking initiative conducted by my company has analyzed reinvestment rates for approximately 40 municipalities across Canada so far. So the findings from this study reveal a very widespread challenge. Most municipalities are not allocating sufficient funds to fully address their annual infrastructure needs. And closing these funding gaps is a very complex and long-term process that many communities in our province continue to face. On average, municipalities are funding only about 44% of their annual capital requirements, which results in an average reinvestment rate of approximately 1%. So this falls short of the recommended target reinvestment rate of around 2.1%, which is considered necessary to maintain infrastructure sustainability. So for Thames Center specifically, your target reinvestment rate is actually 2.1%, so along that average line. And your current actual reinvestment stands at 1.3. So that's slightly better than the national average from the municipalities that we analyzed. But it does still indicate that there is a gap that needs to be bridged to achieve that full sustainable funding model. As another point of comparison, a municipality called Greater Napanee, with a population of, I believe it's 16,900. We looked at their 2020 asset and financial data, and they reported in their previous asset management plan a capital requirement of $12 million. Now, their available capital funding was only $1.9 million. So that results in an annual capital deficit of about 10.1 million, and their target reinvestment rate would be 3.1%, and their actual reinvestment rate is just 0.8%. So that comparison really does highlight the challenge that for capital funding that similar sized municipalities are having in Ontario. Okay, so regarding the proposed levels of service analysis, we utilized our PSD citywide system to project and model asset conditions and risk over time under various funding scenarios, just to help assess the long-term impacts of different investment. So as you would expect, higher funding levels do tend to lead to better projected asset condition and lower risk over time. So the graph that you can see here and within the asset management plan for all assets it shows that average asset conditions are maintained at a higher level under a full funding scenario compared to alternate funding scenarios on average. So there were three main funding scenarios that were considered for the development of this asset management plan. Scenario one is your current capital investment approach. So this maintains the current level of capital spending within the municipality and projects asset conditions and risk based on existing funding levels. Scenario two is the strategic capital investment scenario. So this follows the system-generated investment model, which aims for an optimal funding level aligned with inventory requirements. So this projects future asset conditions and risk based on fully meeting those needs. And the funding method for the scenario includes the tax and rate increases needed each year for 15 years. Now, scenario three is the sustainable condition approach. So this scenario assesses the investment necessary to sustain a specified average condition for each asset category. So this would hold asset conditions constant while determining the required funding. So like scenario two, the funding method is based on tax and rate increases required annually over 15 years. Okay, so this chart breaks down the average annual capital requirement by asset category under each of the three funding scenarios. So essentially, each scenario sets a different funding level, which then determines the amount of investment needed annually to maintain or improve the infrastructure. So for each asset category, the chart shows projected average yearly capital requirements based on those assumptions and goals of each scenario. So scenario one reflects the current investment level. So the requirements might be lower and will lead to declining asset conditions. Scenario two is the strategic approach with higher investment to meet the system-generated needs. And then scenario three focuses on sustaining those certain condition or specific condition levels. So the funding is tailored to maintain infrastructure at a specified target. So scenario three, which is the sustainable condition approach, was the scenario that was chosen as the best fit for the municipality. So that is the focus of maintaining stable asset conditions over time with manageable tax and rate increases phased in over 15 years. This approach balances community expectations, affordability, and regulatory requirements. It also prioritizes timely repairs to preserve asset value and reduces risk by addressing critical needs early. So under scenario three, the annual capital requirement is $8.8 million, which is lower than the $9.9 million estimated in the system-generated scenario. So with a available funding at $6.3 million, this results in a funding gap annually of $2.5 million. So next, we'll just review some of the calculations behind those figures and discuss the proposed phase-in period. So the recommendation is to increase water rates by 0.4% annually, wastewater rates by 0.5%, and stormwater rates by 6.7% for 15 years. And to also continue with the 1% annual capital levy over 15 years to support those proposed levels of service and meet those asset management targets that were set. So the comparison in the chart below includes the scenario for tax-supported assets with 3% annual increases for 5 years, followed by 1.5% for the next 10 years, just to illustrate a more aggressive funding path. So this would technically exceed our recommendation, but it does provide useful context around different investment strategies. So currently, if the municipality has a 1% capital levy in place, that would align with our recommendation. So maintaining that over 15 years would position the municipality very well to meet its asset management goals without putting more undue pressure on tax rates. However, if the levy is increased or reduced or removed for a year or multiple years, the financial strategy would need to be recalculated just to ensure the alignment with long-term goals, and just recalculate what the new rate would be. So just one more note on that, I guess, is that under the regulation, municipalities are required to update their asset management plans in 2030 and every 5 years after. So this funding strategy should be reviewed regularly to reflect any updated costs, new assets, and just evolving community priorities. Okay, so scenario 3 is what we're calling kind of a balanced and strategic approach. So the goal here is not to overinvest or stretch your resources, but basically just to maintain those stable asset conditions and manage risk responsibly over time. We find that it also aligns with the community expectations, because the condition targets set by municipal staff are very realistic and they aim to keep infrastructure safe, reliable, and usable, without overpromising on anything. The approach is also realistic and achievable. It's phased over 15 years, which helps keep those tax and rate increases gradual, and manageable. And finally, it supports risk management by addressing the most critical needs first, before they become emergencies. So overall, it is a very steady, responsible path forward that balances service goals with financial realities. Okay, so for next steps, starting in 2026, the focus should really shift to implementing the strategies within the plan, regularly updating the data, and making continuous improvements. So the regulation, as I said, requires an update every 5 years, starting in 2030. So you will just be required to revise and update those levels of service and performance measures using the most recent data available at the time. Okay, so thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Jasmine. So I'll turn it over to council and see if they have some questions. Anyone? Councillor Lockie is going to ask you a question.
Through your worship, yes, I have a couple of questions. So with the sustainability condition approach for the funding levels, does it factor in our current levels of reserves, and does it factor in any inflation?
No, it would not. We do list out in the financial strategy what your current reserve balances are, but there's not a calculation that we used when calculating the increase required. And it also, sorry, I can't remember if you asked about inflation or operational expenses.
Yeah, so inflation, but kind of back to with your question, so why wouldn't we because it's, if we're using this to figure out, how much we need to get back to make sure that we're covered, why wouldn't we factor in our reserves?
So considering, and sorry, I don't have your reserves on hand at the moment, but considering that you are at a deficit currently and that the financial strategy is a phase in over 15 years, it would be assumed that any major gap that you have during that phase in period before you reach $8.8 million of capital funding, you would use your reserve funds to make up that gap.
Okay. And then my other question was, does it factor in inflation for the replacement costs?
No, unfortunately, it does not. I believe within the financial strategy, there are a few notes just within the recommendations to increase by this much, but also increase by an inflation measure that is determined by the municipality.
Okay. And then just my last question is, there was I think it was page 9. So there was a section written about climate change. And it kind of called out that it is an issue, but it wasn't really clear on what the recommendation was to show the impact on the likelihood of needing to invest more in stormwater. So maybe you could give us some clarification on what is recommended to make sure that we're covered, because really the basis why we do this exercise is to make sure that we're collecting enough from our tax base or for our charges. So what
Right.
would be your recommendation for managing climate change?
So managing climate change, it does really depend on the area of Ontario, it seems, but I guess there is a general consensus for the entire province that getting up to standard is so, so important. And I know that storm standards for storm mains are constantly changing. So basically just staying up to date with those standards recommended by engineers and just having a protocol in place for any replacements that are done and any upgrades that are needed within underserved areas of the municipality, especially analyzing the evolving needs in comparison with the oldest storm systems and potentially even replacing those assets before they reach that end of life and end up failing because as we all know, with the climate the way it is, it's more likely that they will have a failure before they reach that end of their life. So I guess I mean to say just keeping up to date with the current standards, especially when you're installing new infrastructure.
Okay. Now, is this something that we should have a study done just to make sure that we'll be okay?
It tends to be the conservation authority within your region that has responsibility. I wouldn't say responsibility, but they get to it when they can. I would suggest collaborating with them if there is work that can be done or like a floodwater mapping study that can be done in your area. They don't do every area unless it's directly on a water floodplain.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate the answers to the questions, and I also appreciate all the details in the report.
Thanks, Councillor Lockie. I see Councillor Heeman's hand in the air.
I got a comment and a question. Just
Go
responding
ahead.
to Councillor Lockie's question and advice about the Conservation Authority. And no, I think that that generally affects new development, and the Conservation Authority has approved what is known as a freeboard, which is a 1 foot addition to the flood limit boundary. Um, on the elevation calculations to account for climate change variation or uncertainty. So I think that does work with new planning developments. The challenge we'd have, I think, in this municipality is with our legacy settlement areas. And my question is, I guess I guess it's another comment, which is that I think this is a really good report in the sense that I think all of us try and be fiscally responsible with our taxpayers' dollars. Uh, I think part of that is not leaving a mess for successive councils. And I think that, this report shows that we don't have a significant amount of exposure, and that the strategies that we have been doing with inflation-based adjustments for water and wastewater, and having the capital levy and going above 1% with the capital levy this past budget, I think is in line with these recommendations. So I think that's a pretty good gut check to how we've been operating, and it's welcome information. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heeman. Anyone else to Councillor Crockett?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few questions and I guess one suggestion. The first is in the report, machinery and equipment seems to have the lowest replacement cost, yet the highest spend. So I was just wondering if we could get some additional insight on that.
Yeah, thanks for flagging that. And I did do some thinking about that. The replacement cost for machinery and equipment, they were indexed using CPI inflation, which doesn't usually fully reflect the recent or any recent sharp increases. Within that kind of asset category that would be due to supply chain shortages, um, raw material inflation, or pent-up demand. So obviously, the most accurate approach to updating replacement costs before you do an asset management plan would be to update those costs based on recent invoices or getting quotes for them all. But this process for machinery and equipment is extremely time intensive due to that kind of variability between the different types of machinery and equipment assets that you have. So considering that, it is possible that the average annual requirement and sorry, I realize I'm on the wrong slide here, but the average annual requirement could be low just due to the undervalued replacement costs. So it's more than likely that you are spending a more appropriate amount and not too much into that asset category. But that's kind of the reality that we're dealing with when we use a database, right? The data is only as good as the data within it. Yeah. Does that kind of explain a little bit?
Yes, thank you. I guess my next question's in line with that as well, is just the spend on roads seems high, but I would assume that this is likely a common issue amongst municipalities. So I was just wondering for your insights on that.
Yeah. So the road networks system generated annual requirement would be $3 million, and your spend is $2.2 million. And I can tell you that with the common denominator of every community engagement survey that we've done is people love to complain about roads. So I would assume that the gap indicates that some of the life cycle activities like your resurfacing events, are just likely being deferred. And then there is more deterioration down the line, which is a very common trend. And then you do end up having to spend more to kind of make up for that. So I think without your without your life cycle activities built into this annual requirement, so if Jared and his team were not resurfacing roads and crack sealing and whatnot. The replacement only annual requirement for the road network was $4 million. So that $3 million target is taking into consideration the life cycle events that are happening to your roads, which is still quite high, but from the analysis that I've done with many different municipalities, I can tell you that it costs a lot of money to maintain roads. So, yeah, there's always a bit of a gap between that system generated annual requirement and what's actually being contributed to the road network. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question and a comment, if that's okay. Thank you. I'm not sure whether this question's really directed to you, Jasmine, or whether staff will jump in here, but I was just noticing that the forecasts for the strategic analysis that you shared mainly focused on water, wastewater, storm management. I was just wondering how Citywide's numbers aligned with our strategy from Watson and Associates on those same topics.
Okay. Do staff want me to take that?
Sure, you can start. I'll jump in when you're done.
Okay, so yeah, we did analyze that a bit. So Watson and Associates did their comprehensive rate study in 2019, and so their recommendations were based on 2020 to 2029. For water, they recommended a 2.5% increase each year, And for wastewater, it was 2.0 for each year until 2029. So our recommendation was spread out over 15 years from now until then. So in the chart that you can see here, if you can still see my presentation, I know this is for tax assets, but within the financial strategy, there is a similar chart for your water and wastewater assets. And that 5-year projection, so ours for water was 1.1%, and for wastewater, it was 1.5%. And we do not take operational costs into consideration. So if you consider that ours was between 0. About a percentage off from theirs, I would say that it is considered pretty in line with it, especially since you have already increased your water and wastewater rates by those amounts from 2020 when the recommendation was made until 2024. And our model uses the 2024 tax revenue as the baseline for the calculations. So it's consistent with their recommendation minus the operational costs, and just spread out over a longer time frame, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. And just to thank you for your answers, Jasmine. They were really well informed. And then just to end with a comment stating that if we happen to get a delegation with Ministry of Infrastructure, perhaps we can share this deficit number with them. I'm sure it's going to be, we probably won't be the only ones sharing a deficit with them. So thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Lockie. Deputy Mayor Smybert.
Thank you. I just want to say that this asset management plan is a good tool for us to use in our upcoming budgets. And I think I would like to see at some point us take a look at maybe a longer term budget rather than just year by year. But this will certainly help to inform us and get us in that direction. I know that I think what resonates with me is this is the plan with the current assets. So anytime we add to that asset base, it's going to increase that gap in terms of how much money we need to be putting in to replace that asset. So, and I know that we need to do the plan or look at the plan every 5 years. I just wanted to know, do other municipalities, or is it a good idea when even being presented with a capital item that the impact on the asset management plan be reported within the staff report so that council gets a better picture of the overall financial cost kind of long term for that particular asset?
It's definitely possible, and there's many municipalities that do kind of do things with that approach. I will say it would be more so of an intensive process, which is why a lot of smaller townships and municipalities don't do that. Some big regions and cities have more resources for employees that can actually maintain the database full time, collect asset data, and do this kind of an analysis on a yearly basis. But it would be best practice to, when you are acquiring a new asset or commissioning a new asset, to have that in the system and run a report to see how that changes things, especially or even just on a year-to-year basis when you're doing your financial audits, for example, and then before budget season the next time.
Great. Thank you, Jasmine, for that.
Thanks. Anyone else with a question? I don't see any. So thank you very much, Jasmine. Appreciate your report and all the work in it. But I do have one question. The increases, are they year over year?
They are for 15 years.
Okay. All right then. Thanks. If there are no questions, then I'd like a mover and a seconder that the presentation by Jasmine Chad of PSD Citywide regarding the 2025 Asset Management Plan be received for information. Deputy Mayor Smybert and Councillor Lockie, all in favor? That carries. And Jasmine, are you still on the line?
I am, yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask for council's consensus to move into item 9.1 of the 2025 Corporate Asset Management Plan to be presented by our director, Mr. D'Angelo. In case council has some questions for you. Are you okay with that?
That's fine. I'll be here.
Okay, all right then, thanks. At this point, then I'll turn it over to Mr. D'Angelo.
Mayor, perhaps I could say a few words as the director approaches the front desk there, table. I do want to say how proud I am of all the staff that have contributed to this work, frankly, as well as council who saw the wisdom earlier on in terms of already adopting the capital infrastructure levy. This report speaks to it, and it's in essence saying, you know, keep doing what you're doing as a council, as a corporation, as an organization, which is a far cry different than other local municipalities. Jasmine gave an example of Greater Napanee earlier, which was one example of many that really highlights the unique scenario that Thames Center finds itself in terms of not having a large infrastructure gap with the tremendous request for additional funds moving forward. We're just being asked here to maintain the course and being done ahead of the scheduled deadline for the province. So we're meeting the legislative responsibility ahead of other municipalities as well. So I want to really thank again staff that have contributed to this. It really was a one team effort from staff from all across departments with the dedicated focus to be able to deliver this year, of course, with Jasmine's help and guidance. So with that, Mayor, I appreciate the opportunity to say some of those remarks as director takes it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and councilors. The CAO took a little bit of my thunder, but I will acknowledge Adam Sanderson, who's our project manager, and Megan Fletcher, who's our GIS coordinator and asset management coordinator. They were instrumental working with Jasmine. What a fantastic team. They met every Thursday, going over it. And then they did some good consultation with each of the department heads. So there's a lot of good support and collaboration with regards to this project. I'm cognizant as your treasurer that when we introduce our annual budget proposals, that this asset management plan helps prioritize your capital assets. So when we present our capital assets budget and our business cases, it incorporates the elements here in the asset management plan. And also I'm cognizant of councilors' commitment when you had delegations on your stormwater management. There was a commitment from this council to assess those rates. So we're cognizant of that also. And so I wasn't here at your first couple of versions of your asset management plan, but you have progressed as a municipality from 2019 when you first introduced it to this point where now you have a comprehensive capital asset management plan for your core and non-core assets. We do have Megan who's inputting it, and it's pretty robust. There is a funding gap. Every municipality has that funding gap. I would submit you're in a more favorable position because you had the foresight to introduce your capital levy. So kudos to this council for having that foresight. Other than that, it was a collaborative approach. We shared the level of the proposed level of service with department heads. We came with a consensus decision to recommend to this council for its support. In the event you pass this report, we would send it on to the Ministry of Infrastructure. We would publish it on our website. And then, as I referenced, we will use it when we develop our capital budgets. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any questions of the director or any follow-up questions through to Jasmine? None? Okay, well, thank you very much, Karin. And then I guess, Jasmine, there are no other questions for council. So I want to thank you very much again for your work on this project and your presentation to council this evening.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I look forward to seeing how this supports your decision-making in the years ahead. Have a great
Yeah, me
rest of your
too.
meeting.
Okay, thank you. Great, then, so council, a mover and a seconder that report number CSF 00625 be received for information, and that the 2025 corporate asset management plan attached to this report be approved, and that the staff be directed to submit the 2025 corporate asset management plan to the Ministry of Infrastructure and publicly published on the website for the municipality of Thames Centre, and that the 2025 asset management plan be referred to the 2026 budget planning for consideration. A mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Crockett and seconded by Councillor Lockie. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Okay. I don't think. All right, so then the next item on the agenda, I was just checking to make sure I didn't miss one dot. Approval of the previous minutes is item number 7 on your agenda. So they would be the minutes of the May 26, 2025 meeting. Councillor Lockie, I'm sorry, Councillor Heeman and Councillor Crockett. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. So on to the consent agenda. Items listed under the consent agenda are received for information in one motion. Council members may request that one or more items be separated for further action. Unless there is anything that council wishes to pull for further discussion, that items 8.1 through 8.7 be received for information. Deputy Mayor Smybert and seconded by Councillor Heeman. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Let's see now. We're going down to item number 10, reports of departments. Committees, sorry. Items listed under the reports of committees are approved by council in one motion. Council members may request that one or more items be separated for further action. Unless there is something you wish to speak about, then a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Lockie and Deputy Mayor Smybert, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. Okay. The next item is my report from last month's activities. I'm pleased to report my activities since my last report. With the month of May now behind us, my report includes the usual round of meetings at both the County of Middlesex as well as meetings here in Thames Centre. From April 30th to May 2nd, the Deputy Mayor and I had the opportunity to attend the annual OSM, which stands for the Ontario Small Urban Municipalities Conference held this year in the city of Collingwood, which surprisingly has become very large. This was an exceptionally good conference this year with lots of speakers and information sessions covering a wide variety of topics, including the ongoing talks of the impacts of the trade tariffs from the United States and what Canada can or should do, or in some cases not do, during this unsettled period in our history. There was also an appearance from the new Provincial Minister of Housing, the Honourable Rob Flack, who took the time to bring the membership up to date on the various new housing initiatives and a chance for questions to be asked and answered. Council was busy over the month with a council planning workshop, Ward 2 mini town hall, tariff and trade information session, emergency management meeting held in Thames Centre, TVSB planning meeting with members of staff, elected officials, and from the school board on planning matters. May the 2nd saw our annual volunteer appreciation breakfast hosted by the municipality to recognize the achievements of all the people who helped to make Thames Centre such a great and helpful place to live. I want to thank all those who organized the event, provided the breakfast, and especially to our Ward 2 Councillor Daniel Lockie, who filled in for me while I was away. Both the Deputy Mayor and I attended the annual Middlesex Day held this year in Strathroy-Caradoc. A number of interesting speakers were invited to showcase their own unique and special businesses in the area that add so much to the life of Middlesex County. May the 7th was our first ever traffic and safety town hall. My thanks to all the groups who attended and people who asked questions of the experts to receive some information regarding their concerns. It was well attended, and council is happy to provide these opportunities to members of the public as they express their thoughts and ask questions. On May 24th, we were invited to the grand opening of the new Aeroc asphalt recycling plant just east of Dorchester on the way to Putnam. My sincere congratulations to all involved in this project, and so glad to have it here in Thames Centre. Along the way, council is working on an economic development project and hope that we will have a little bit more information as time goes by. In the meantime, warmer weather is finally making an appearance, and as such, I would like to wish all our residents a healthy and safe summer. Let's see now. We need to, I don't believe there's any unfinished business or no motions and new business. So mover and seconder for the bylaws to be given a first, second, and third reading and adopted. Councillor Lucky and Deputy Mayor Smybert. All in favor? Okay, thank you. And council will now be moving into closed session for which there will be no live streaming. The live stream will resume once the closed session portion has been completed. And just before we vote on that, since some people do leave the live streaming, I just wanted to let you know that the next two meetings of council are Monday, January. Oh dear, I'm ahead of myself. I don't want it to be January. Monday, January 23rd, 2025 at 5 p.m. I said it again. Oh my gosh. I think I have a mental block here. Okay, let's do this again. Monday, June 23rd at 2025 at 5 p.m. And then Monday, July 28th at 5 p.m. as well. All right. So a mover and a seconder to go to closed. Councillor Crockett and Deputy and Councillor Lockie. All in favor? Thank you. That carries. So we'll take a short break and be back.